Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out hard conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus. Just doing my best to represent him well everywhere I go. Feel free to follow me on X at Forge and A, and you can also check out Forge and Anvil, the Facebook page as well. That's a new update for you. So feel free to do that. We're going to go ahead and have a bit of a grab bag episode. There is a ton of stuff happening right now. It is an incredibly busy news cycle. So there's just a lot of things to get into, everything from the Epstein list to stuff happening with the DOJ, as well as a really important campaign that is being launched to attempt to overturn Obergefell. So we're going to talk about that tonight with my guest, Ron Coleman, who has joined for his second time. It's actually been quite a while since I had you on, Ron, but I appreciate you coming back. So go ahead and give an introduction to those who may not be familiar with you and your work.
They're really such people. I just assumed, Connor, that it's been such a long time because I said something inappropriate or wrong last time. I'm a lawyer in New Jersey. I'm very active on social media. I try to educate people about legal and constitutional matters, sometimes intellectual property, defamation law. I'm a litigator. I go to court. I go to court at trial. I go to court at the appellate division. Sometimes I go to the Supreme Court. What else? Things I'm on X. I used to be partners with Harmeet Dillon. I'm politically conservative. I'm an Orthodox Jew, so I'm socially conservative as well. And I can do backwards writing. You know that? I can write like a mirror writing.
That's awesome. I can't do that.
You're missing so much.
Yeah, it's one of those skills that they just don't teach anymore in public schools.
You can't teach it. It's like a mutation. It was helpful. It was like kind of a party trick when I was on dates,
I love it. Well, let's go ahead and
I'm dating a weird genius kind of guy whose skills might not be all that practical.
It's worked for you so far.
Thank God.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and let's talk about the Epstein stuff because right now at the time of recording this, it is currently Monday night. This probably won't release until a few days later, so who knows what will develop between now and when this episode actually drops. But over the weekend, a lot more details of the Epstein files has been released, and it is just a grab bag of crazy. There's a little bit of everything going on here. Just to give a couple examples to you and the audience here. So, pizza, the word pizza was mentioned numerous times throughout the documents. So who knows what that means, if Pizzagate was a 100% true conspiracy or not. A bunch of people are going crazy with that. There's been a bunch of other important revelations that Epstein was allegedly pushing a lot of transgenderism. Really early on, he was pushing for trans kids. I want to say I saw one where he was pushing for trans 3-year-olds. There was instances of Epstein trying to sue the CIA. There's instances of Epstein. He actually had an account. It was a checking account that he labeled Baal, as in demon god Baal from the Old Testament. Of course, there's been some new revelations about Bill Gates possibly having sexually transmitted disease from Russian sex workers. And the thing with all of this is it is currently being sorted out. So right now, it's just a giant mess. And there are independent investigators looking through all of this and systematizing it. I'm sure eventually we're all going to have a summarized version of what's been in this recent drop. But right now, it's just crazy town. So, Ron, feel free to share anything that you found significant in these findings and just your overall reaction to the craziness that's kind of unfolded.
I'll be honest with you, Connor. I know very little about it. I've been really busy. I find this stuff to be quite distasteful. And what I depend on when it's this kind of mass information dump is for the people that I trust and rely on the internet to tell me what's the most important and most meaningful and most significant things. One thing that one of my friends pointed out, I wish I could remember who said it, but there isn't really an Epstein list. there's no list. There's just all this crap, all this garbage, all these documents that were picked up by the FBI in the course of investigations. Very, very wide dragnet. Everyone who ever interacted with him, pretty much on any level, that would leave any sort of evidentiary mark behind. But it's not as if there's this. And I most insightful people, I think, realize, although there are freaky cases where it happens, you really don't realistically expect with a character like this to have a magical little black book that has the names of all the people that he got girls for and what they like and their contact information and what they pay. Who would ever put something like that together? That's insane. It's irrational. But you're talking about all the investigators are going to go through all this stuff in 2025. People are feeding this into AI engines, and that we can get a lot more information and find a lot more links and connections than we ever could before. So it's going to be fun. I don't think it's going to be the political bonanza, much less the anti-Trump bomb that the people who were pushing so heavily for this were expecting it to be. Certainly not damaging to Trump, as far as if it had been, I'm sure we would have heard about it by now.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think at the end of the day, we are in this weird time where AI is contributing a lot to the confusion, like you mentioned. And then just there's just information. There's so much information right now that's being declassified or discovered, uncovered. Like the Cam Higbee stuff, for example. Data Republican put out a massive list all about these individuals that were possible donors to basically support left-wing causes in Minnesota with the immigration stuff. But a prime example, the vice mayor of Cookeville, Tennessee, was actually listed as a possible donor because his name was on the list. But of course, if you do a Google search, there are multiple other people that have the same name as him. And I personally reached out to him and talked to him, and he provided me a statement. And of course, I've blown up the statement. I've tried to get Data Republican to see it. To my knowledge, she hasn't. I know that he really wants his stuff removed from that list. And at the end of the day, to be fair to Data Republican, I'm a fan of what she's attempting to do. Mistakes are going to be made when we have to rely on independent sources because so much of our institutions have failed us. But at the end of the day, there's still a conservative vice mayor in Cookeville who's already embroiled in multiple free speech fights and trying to get some inappropriate aged books out of the library. So he's actually in the middle of this local battle, and now he's dealing with other constituents saying, "Hey, are you actually secretly a left-wing donor?" And so that's just an example, though, where these things can get really murky really fast. The only thing I do want to say, as far as the list is concerned, I totally agree with you. I don't think that there's a little black book, but I do think that we've been told multiple times by folks like Bondi that there's evidence of individuals who may have been wrapped up with Epstein. So I think what the base is looking for is not necessarily a black book, more like, okay, if we have trails that lead to names, we've got a de facto list, so to speak. But you would know more about the legal aspect of that. So what do you think is going on with
I'll
that?
say, look, people are going to be putting together a list. And as you point out, it's going to be based on some erroneous information, some outright false information. Who knows how information gets into a collection like this. And it's going to be based on a lot of legitimate information. I saw a picture of I forget now what his position was, but some guy standing in a photograph with a young girl in a bathrobe whose face was covered, standing there in his tidy whities. there are going to be people with a lot of problems, a lot of people who don't want to be found in that, in that collection. It might be a little bit premature. The question is, was this really? Look, it was not handled well politically at any stage, really, at any stage. But finally, listen, we can have this public purgation of this. It's all basically being vomited out of the record. There are going to be some innocent people hurt. There are going to also be some people who have some splaining to do, and frankly, they should explain themselves. I also think one thing I do see that's emerging is that a much clearer picture of who and what this guy was is coming out. And some of the crazy conspiracy stuff is not really checking out.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. Was it you who just mentioned a minute ago that he was considering suing the CIA?
That is one of the things that I've seen as far as, this is, again, people going through what's been dumped and kind of putting together their own reporting on the matter. And that was something that I saw, as apparently Epstein at some point sued the CIA himself. And I believe the theory was that he's trying to see whether or not the CIA considered him to be an asset, which is one of the accusations that's constantly thrown around, is that Epstein was a CIA asset.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. So if he was considering suing them, unless it's an elaborate feint, that would suggest that he wasn't working with them. I would think that if there was this gigantic smoking gun linking him to the Mossad, we would have heard about that by now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, the whole thing is wild. And I think at the end of the day with Epstein, and this is not what anyone wants to hear, anyone on the right wants to hear, but I don't know if we'll ever know the full truth. I just think that might be the territory that we're moving into. And the reality is, I think, like you said, it was handled politically very poorly. I thought the whole binder thing with Pam Bondi was terrible. I mean,
what an unforced error. There's no excuse for that at all.
Absolutely. What do you think was even the rationale for that?
This is one of the hardest. I mean, almost everybody who was invited to that are friends of mine. And I felt so bad for them, standing there with their binders. I really don't. That one continues to elude me, because I've gotten a bit of a reputation as a Pam Bondi simp. And I suppose justifiably, I think people who are coming to conclusions about her work are mostly operating in the dark about what she's really doing, what she's really done, and what has to be done and what it takes to do it right. But that one's got her fingerprints all over it. And I don't know whose idea it was. I can see the pieces that were probably in play that made it come together that way. I have no problem with that. In other words, I can imagine the idea was, one of the things we're going to do in this administration is to legitimize and raise the profiles of the social media influencers who are the new media voices and who've done so much to get us to this point. And we're going to give them this kind of access that the corporate media has had for generations. I get that part of it, and the transparency impetus I get, but the idea of putting on a show to achieve narrative points on those first two things, but then basically the binders are like April Fools. Why would you do that? To this day I haven't figured that out, except that my guess, and I've never worked in the White House, but I guess I know a lot of people who do or have. Sounds like some assistant who, to my knowledge, has never been named, thought it would be a great idea and Pam probably uncritically relied on that person in a way that I'm sure she never has since.
Yeah, could be.
That's
Well,
the best I can do.
well, on that note, I know obviously Pam Bondi has been getting hit really hard by the base. You know, so many people over the last year have called for Trump to replace her. I know a lot of people have even been wanting her to be replaced with Harmeet. Harmeet's under her, and Harmeet's been, as far as I can tell, she's been doing a fantastic job. It seems like she's been a real bulldog for our side, which is great. But recently, of course, Don Lemon has officially been arrested. He's actually facing some real accountability now, as well as the individuals that, of course, went with him and essentially terrorized a small church in Minnesota. So, what's your read on the Don Lemon situation? I mean, is it a solid case, and what do you think is happening that has kind of made the response to that church? It seems like the DOJ responded much quicker to that than some of these other instances that our side has been calling for justice on.
Well, the one thing about the church invasion is that it was really discreet, not discreet in the sense of hidden and quiet, but discreet in the sense of amenable to being separated and not necessarily related directly to anything else. The people involved were all on video. You had Don Lemon giving it this heightened exposure. You had the context of Harmeet Dillon recently making use of the FACE Act in respect to attacks or violence outside of synagogues. So it was almost a perfect moment. There's also, there's a lot of political mileage to be gained from for the government to take the position, and it may not ultimately prevail at trial, but for the government to take the position that the fact that you're a member of the media, or what makes you a member of the media more than me. See, I'm a media too.
Right.
The fact that you once had a job at CNN, I mean, there might be some close fact questions on his criminal liability, but I think a lot of people felt and feel that a message had to be sent that the sort of two-tiered justice where famous people can get away with things that regular people can't was not acceptable. And in a way, when that judge refused to sign the arrest warrant, that federal magistrate, that really heightened the issue. It would have been a mistake to back down at that point. I'm glad they went ahead and got the indictment. So, I don't think it's fair to say how come they acted so fast there, but they didn't act so fast with respect to any, other things that I think are much more ambiguous or that involve complicated relationships. For example, all the stuff with the governors and mayors of blue jurisdictions acting in an openly insurrection-y fashion. That's far more important big picture than a bunch of scruffy amateur street drama kings busting into a church, which is ugly and nasty, but when it's over, it's over. What's going on in the States, the insurrection type stuff that's going on in the States, is really more fundamentally problematic. But that's why, even though it's more important in the long run, it's really a big deal to do it right. and also to avoid constitutional showdowns if possible. And I think it was a masterstroke by Trump to send Tom Homan over to sit down with Tim Walz or Tim Walz's people and say, do you have any idea what kind of kick-ass you're setting yourself up for here, or whoop-ass, I guess, right? But the can of whoop-ass that you're about to open up, are you crazy? And although Walz doesn't control the Minneapolis City Police, things changed a lot in Minneapolis after Tom Homan, read him the riot act, literally. That was a really presidential moment of leadership. And the thing we see about terrorists, and this is true whether they're the street thugs of Antifa or the Palestinians in Gaza, you can actually, although it comes with a certain amount of risk to do so, but you can make concessions to them without worrying that by doing so, you've lost an opportunity to hit back hard, because they're so evil and they're so committed to a vision that does not brook compromise that they will give you another opportunity soon, no matter what concession you make. So you're storing up the public relations equity of making concessions. And again, those come with a cost. And I'm talking now in the short term, not over. In the long term, if all you do is make concessions, then the problem is tactically or strategically, you have undermined your the disincentive to attack. Okay, there's no, what's the word? There's no there's no, what's the word I want to use when in military international affairs we say there's no and I have click. I'm not gonna get it. Deterrent. There's no deterrent. There's no deterrent. Let's use some detergent and remove that entire moment. There's no deterrent if you keep making, you allow them to. One thing that has happened, and I've said this in a couple of other programs, is that over the last few years, the Overton window, the societal and institutional views of what is acceptable in terms of pushback to law enforcement, as well as cooperation by law enforcement and municipalities with criminal conduct, has moved in a really, really harmful way. So I don't want to make an argument for excessive concessions, but the point is, if Trump gets the job done by having Tom Homan go to Minnesota and getting Walz to realize this isn't going to cut it, that's great. That means you don't get an arrest. You don't get the perp walk that you want. But you know what? Those perp walks, first of all, it seems almost certain that they're going to happen sooner or later, whether it's going to be the, Mayor Fry or whoever it is. There's some, and now New York's trying to get into the game. Governor Hochul, that non-entity, which is, these are, and also the New Jersey governor, the new governor, Mishi. I live in New Jersey. I don't even have her name down. But the point is, these are all non-entities. These are these female or essentially female men like Walz, who are just they work their way up through the Democrat. I mean, this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but there is no need to be a good politician or to have charisma or to have a program to succeed in the Democratic Party. It's all institutional. It's like the Bolshevik Party. It's all a matter of who the general secretary chooses to put into place, and then because you're in one party states and one party municipalities. Be that as it may, these people are making radicalism, extreme state-based anti-government radicalism, anti-law enforcement radicalism, part of the way they govern. So the opportunities are going to be there, but these are much, much more complicated cases. And you got to build up, you got to choose the jurisdiction where you bring these cases. You've got to build up the institutional support within the Justice Department and within the executive branch, maybe even in Congress. If you're going to start actually bringing, criminal charges against political leadership in big cities and states. So you can't compare that to a church invasion. And by the way, another point I want to make very clear, because this is a church-going audience that you have here, the opportunity for the White House to demonstrate that Americans will not put up with a church being invaded is frankly one that that's a lesson that we must take the opportunity to teach.
Absolutely.
It's the basis of our society. And it's got to be a bright line.
Yeah. Yeah. I could not agree more. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, and this is me trying to summarize things. So essentially, some of these instances where the base is screaming for justice for the January 6th reaction by the left, or the individuals that were persecuted under the FACE Act, or the most perfect, fantastic, wonderfully ran election of 2020 that has ever been an election ran ever in the history of the United States. Right. So those things, ultimately those are essentially big conspiracies in the real sense, where there's a ton of actors, some of which may be elected officials, some of it's maybe big business, NGOs, whatever the case may be.
And some of them are part of the federal government even now.
Yeah.
So you have to, I mean, job one when getting into any of these investigations, that they all had to happen, is securing the perimeter, security.
Yeah.
And that's something that this White House has been historically fantastic at. There have been no meaningful leaks, and leakers that have been identified have been yeeted instantly. They're gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
These are much bigger projects. Are people concerned about statutes of limitations having been missed? The idea that everybody on the internet knows this and has figured this out, but somehow David Warrington, my former partner in White House counsel, and Pam Bondi haven't figured that out. It strikes me as a little bit silly. Okay, it's going to happen, but this church invasion was so clumsy and ham-fisted and so over the top. Like, what do you say? Well, I guess we shouldn't do any. I mean, really, here you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? I guess we shouldn't do anything because we haven't done anything about the the 2020 election.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the 2020 election, you got the FBI going into
Fulton County
in Georgia.
Yeah.
And walking out with boxes. Did you ever think that would happen? I didn't. I thought it was over. A lot of information has been preserved. A lot of data has been preserved. And by the way, as a litigation lawyer, I can tell you that everyone thinks, but it's all been destroyed. It's all been deleted. Nothing gets deleted. Yes, if Hillary Clinton takes a phone and breaks it with a hammer, and it's allowed to be hosed down a sewer or whatever they did, and no one does anything about it. But if law enforcement is doing its job, which they are now, it's really hard to get rid of data. So I keep having to apologize and say I'm not saying trust the plan, but ultimately I am saying trust the plan. It's going to happen. This church invasion thing was almost a gift, and you'd be foolish to, not to say, okay, we need to roll over on this immediately. It's one event. It's one group of people. We know who they are. We know what they did. So you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just much easier to move fast on this. I think the only concern that I have, and I'm sure you share it, is just it's a perception game, obviously. You know, at the end of the day, there's still the political calculations of we're coming up on a midterm, and whether we like it or not, I mean, there are so many individuals that have been lost from our coalition because they feel like justice is not coming swift enough. And even if they, you know, are maybe swayed a little bit by your arguments, at the end of the day, we know that there's so many individuals who are not going to listen to this podcast, that are going to just vote based on the perception. And so, you know, ultimately, the thing that I'm concerned about is, let's say we lose the midterms because things don't happen quick enough. I mean, how much do you think, you know, losing the midterms? Let's say Democrats take both the House and the Senate. I mean, is that going to completely prevent the DOJ from actually fulfilling some of these cases that they're building?
No, not at all. A couple of things. One is that never before has political memory been shorter than it is in 2026.
Right.
And it's shrinking by the day. So to tell me, I remember I was on a podcast on a panel a few months ago where the guy said Epstein is going to sink Trump. You know, the base, the middle, it's going to be completely forgotten by election day. And if anything, you know, Trump came through on it. But you can't tell me in February of 2026 that the snapshot of these people's dissatisfaction is going to drive what happens in the fall. I got to tell you, anyone who stays home in the fall of 2026 because they're not getting what they want, they don't think it's coming fast enough. They don't think it's coming hard enough. Even if we froze time, even if it were today, we're November. So we didn't, you know, Ron Coleman's promise it's coming, it didn't come. You still tell me what your options are. What are your options? You're gonna let the Democrats? It's no longer I'll live with Bill Clinton. It's not even I'll live with Barack Obama. These people are out of their minds. They're satanic. Whatever the right thing is, they want the opposite. We need to never, I mean, if anyone who doesn't get that and is dissatisfied with the pace of developments, I'm not really interested in their opinion. They're not serious people. They got to cut, they've got to decide in November of 2026, what are the real options here? Look at the positions. Look what's happened in the states where Democrats have installed new leadership. The governors are setting up ICE monitoring websites by the states. These are the people. So what's your option? What are you talking about? I don't buy it. I don't buy it. But also, it's just, like I said, it's February. The world's going to look very, very different. Very, very different. And I think we're going to see between now and the summer some amazing law enforcement stuff going on. And really also to look at this Justice Department and not appreciate what's happened in the Supreme Court and all the preposterous politicized judging that, and not only judging, but also judicial conduct that isn't literally only judging, that Republicans and that the White House has had to get past in order to get anything done. I just don't see how people can complain, except that they live in a fantasy world where it's easy to sit on the internet and talk about the things you need to do. But when you actually roll up your sleeves and do them and do the work and the spade work and the advanced work and the security work and the political work and all those things, we got to grow up. And we're not going to grow up. But guys like you who get it, I think, need to I think our responsibility as people who have platforms is to not speak down to people and not sound like, proxies for their administration. I'm not part of the administration, but to nonetheless counsel people to take a longer term view on where we're going to be and to see things in process as they move.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Send them to me. Send them to me, Connor. I'll straighten them out.
All right. There we go.
You can't straighten them out on everything. Like, one of the things I just said, as you and I were talking about earlier today, I did a stream with Viva Frey, and he and I don't see eye to eye on all these same questions. And he raises many of the same current concerns that that you're echoing here too. There are some questions I don't have good answers to, and I can't cheerlead for. Why does it still seem as if Qatar has so much influence in the White House? Why does it still seem as if nothing really gets done with big pharma's interest? Like, why do they always get what they want? Like, there are still serious questions, but we're talking about really structural, long-standing issues. So we're gonna have to be patient.
Yeah, absolutely. I had William Wolf on a couple weeks back, and he talked about instead of being black pilled, be reality pilled, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, is recognizing that these things take time. I mean, there's some things we're getting close to being out of time. That's what I think the concern is. But I actually told people this leading up to the 2024 election, is I was telling people, vote for Trump, not because he's going to fix everything, but because he's a tourniquet. He's going to stop the bleeding. And right now, I was saying, clear back then that there are many good things happening at the grassroots level. There are many good things happening. There are men going back to church for the first time in years. There are families being raised, and there's just so much happening on the individual level. But it takes time for that to actually fully seep its way to the culture broadly. But
Connor,
we need time, and Trump bought us time.
And that makes me think of something else, which is that we need to do some of the work ourselves. This idea that Daddy Trump is here to fix everything and to make everything work is a big mistake. People need to get up in the morning and go to church on Sunday. People need to marry their fiancés. People need to only have children with people that they're married to. People need to attend school board meetings. People need to see what's going on in their own children's lives. People need to people need to tell their children, no, you can't have a cell phone. You can't take a cell. Like, the change has to come from below. We have to live it.
Yeah. Amen. I could not agree with that more, and that's something that I've been harping on for a while. So I appreciate you adding that in there. So I want to spend the last little bit of our time talking about this campaign that you're a part of, because this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I've mentioned this multiple times on the podcast, that I think Obergefell was a mistake, and you're a part of a campaign that is seeking to actively try to get Obergefell overturned, and it really seems to be reminiscent of the good parts of the pro-life movement back when the pro-life movement had its stuff a little bit more together, trying to overturn Roe. It's called the Greater Than Campaign. But tell us a little bit more about what this campaign is, Ron, and feel free to share as much as you want about your involvement.
Well, the idea here is that the way Katie Faust, who's the spearhead of this, has been her focus here is that there has been the development of a commoditization, not the word that she uses, but babies have become commodities that people buy. They rent out, they buy them from foreign countries. They buy them from fertility labs. And there was a long time where people understood that there's a lot to be said for adoption and finding ways for families that have children to have children. But after Obergefell, we moved into a mode where, since homosexual couples are legally and presumably morally equivalent to heterosexual couples, they are entitled to children just like heterosexual couples have. And if they can't have them, which they can't, then we should do anything we can to allow them to have them. Not only, in other words, will we give them the privilege of marriage, which is reserved for the continuation of and the enhancement of family life, but even the parts that they themselves have ceded, which is their ability to have children, society is going to allow them to have. Children are being provided through all kinds of agencies, all kinds of methods and all kinds of devices. Children are being provided to homosexual couples. And what really gets under Katie's skin, and when she talks to people about this, you see it yourself, is this idea that we're lying when we pretend that that's normal for kids, that that's not a harmful thing for kids. Kids are entitled to a mother and a father. Now, one of the things, obviously, that people say all the time is, well, is it better that they should not have parents at all? And the answer to that sometimes is yes. Sometimes it is better. Would you say that it's better to raise a child in a concentration camp rather than to not have parents? No, they should not be in a concentration camp if they can't have parents. Just the entire premise of the question is wrong. One of the things that really, look, this is not an issue that really affects the Orthodox Jewish community as such. We don't tolerate homosexual life. It's not an issue for us, and these issues don't really affect us. But we're Americans, and we certainly want to see them, traditional morality return to American life. We also we're really big on kids. We really like kids. We have a lot of them, and we can readily see what's wrong with this. Obergefell, as a lawyer, it's a terrible decision. It's right up there with Roe versus Wade in terms of just being illogical and inherently, contradictory and offensive. And it was just, as Chief Justice Roberts said, it was just a victory of will. They wanted it over law. It's bad for law, and the ripple effects, the social and legal ripple effects from that decision have been catastrophic for society. Catastrophic. I mean, look, the same thing with Roe versus Wade. Abortion is a fact of life in America in a way that it never would have been if it weren't for Roe versus Wade. So even though Roe versus Wade, 50 years later, 40-something years later, is overturned, the damage has been done. The damage has been done, separate and apart from the lives that have been taken. The social damage has been done. And I think to some extent the idea behind this initiative is, let's not wait 50 years. On Obergefell, we know it's bad law. You know, as Justice Scalia pointed out in his dissent from Obergefell, this was the question of homosexual marriage was a perfect example of democracy in action. States that didn't want it didn't have it, and states that wanted it had it. And it was a perfect example of federalism and exactly how that is supposed to go. And instead, the activists said, we're going to lose too many states. We're going to lose too many states, so we're going to so therefore we have to do something about that now.
Yeah,
we've got to change the conversation. And what? So part of my involvement is really, to a large extent, to be someone who helps amplify the message on social media.
So realistically, I mean, what do you think it's gonna? You know, there's so much we could ask on this, and I know it's these are big questions that we could probably have done a whole episode on. But what do you think is going to be like the strategy as far as actually getting that overturned? I know that that there's some state reps in Tennessee, for example. Gina Bolso has submitted a few bills that sound like they could, you know, if they were litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court, possibly lead to an overturning of Obergefell. So is the goal just to get a case before the Supreme Court that would basically be an easy layup? I mean, what's the strategy here?
I don't know, frankly, what the legal strategy is. I think there are a lot of people working on a lot of paths to make that happen. But I do think that right now, the thinking is we need to change a lot of minds in the mainstream and among elites about what is acceptable and what, because again, the social and cultural damage has been done. So part of our immediate job is to get people to look at this differently, and therefore the focus on children is one that we think helps get this across in a way that reminds everyone that there are other people involved besides adults who want to act on their own impulses.
Yeah. Well, we will certainly be praying that it is successful. So that's the Greater Than campaign. Remind me, what's the URL? Do you remember?
Yes. So it's actually thembeforeus.com.
Thembeforeus.com.
All one word, thembeforeus.com. And
thembeforeus.com is Katie Faust. It's her organization.
And it's also, I mean, actually, there are two URLs. The other one is greaterthancampaign.com. So you can go to either one of those.
Campaign.com.
Yeah, they lead to each other, and we are hopefully going to, it's a gigantic job, but with God's help, we'll get it across. Yeah,
amen to that. I love the branding too. It's got the greater than sign, but it's done in the exact same way that the equal sign was done when people were fighting for equality under the law for gay marriage. So yeah, I appreciate the branding there. That was a solid move. But well, Ron, I know we are out of time, but I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing about the campaign, as well as just letting me pick your brain about a grab bag full of legal questions. I really appreciate it. Where can people go if they want to follow you and keep up with you?
Best way to go is to look for Ron Coleman, spelled with an E, Coleman. or just search for Ron Coleman. I do have a pretty good, search engine optimization profile. But put in the word lawyer, you're gonna end up with a much different result than you might expect. But on X at Ron Coleman, and all the other stuff I do gets filtered through there. Great seeing you again, Connor.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining in. Thank you, listeners. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I really appreciate your support. Again, feel free, if you have not already followed me on X, you can follow me at Forge and A. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time.